Public Affairs very much thanks Residco, our sole corporate underwriter, for helping to make the production of this show possible.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. What's the most important data that people should know about the Chicago public schools?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is that kids can't read. They're not learning at Chicago public schools. The fact that only 8% of black children can do math at grade level at CPS. Only some 15% of kids can read at grade level. That's the real sad stat, and it's been going on for a long time. And Jeff, nobody seems to care. It hasn't changed. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's fighting for it.
You care.
I'm saying broadly nobody, because the system, and I'm talking about the system doesn't care. You got a monopoly of union. You got a monopoly of teachers in the teachers union. You got a monopoly of schools in the administration. They fight every once in a while, but they, for the most part, get along. But they forget to teach kids how to read. And we can't have a successful Chicago if we have a bunch of kids who are illiterate.
What's their goal? What's the goal of the administration at CPS? What's the goal of the Chicago Teachers Union?
Look, if you look at it, and when you look at these results of kids not being able to read and do math, when you look at the number of people leaving the system, right? CPS has lost 115,000 students in the last 20 years. It's a system that doesn't teach kids anymore. It's become a massive, it's got 45,000 employees, so it's become a works program. That's what it is. It's a works program that takes care of kids during the day. But it has given up, from what I can see. And I'm speaking in generalities, of course. There's good schools, there's great teachers. But in general terms, when only 25% of kids can do reading at grade level in the whole system, and when only 20% of kids can do math at grade level in the entire system, it's not about teaching. It's not about learning anymore. It's about just taking care of a 45,000 employee staff.
Who runs the system?
Who runs the system? The unions run the system. The administrators run the system. There's a lot of people. I think I want to bring up an important point. A lot of people want to blame everything on the Chicago Teachers Union, and they do deserve a massive amount of blame. But everybody has to remember where the unions get their power from. They get their powers from the legislature, the state legislature. They're the ones that give them the power to strike. They're the ones that say they can collectively bargain over all kinds of things. They're the ones that keep giving them, long-term contracts. All those things are because the legislature allows it. In some states, like Texas, local governments aren't allowed to negotiate with the teachers' unions. The teacher union can exist, but the governments cannot bargain with them. Here, we do the exact opposite. Our local governments must negotiate with the unions, and the unions have all the power. And the parents and the kids have zero power.
So do you have to radically change the laws, radically change the education code to accomplish what you might want to accomplish in terms of kids learning how to read?
Well, I mean, in theory, I want to say that I would imagine that most teachers care about kids reading and would want kids to read. But it's a system that doesn't incentivize that. It's a system that doesn't allow discipline. It doesn't seem to run on metrics. It doesn't seem to run on ambitious goals of reading. And it's why so many kids can't read. And I think you have some data there. I recall the Good Times. If everybody remembers Norman Lear, he had a TV show called Good Times. And in that, 50 years ago, 1974 was the episode, they ridiculed Chicago for passing kids along to the next grade even when they weren't ready. They ridiculed them 50 years ago, and we're doing the exact same thing today.
But the point is, it was social promotion. Kids just got passed from one grade to the other. So if they didn't learn how to read by third grade, they wouldn't learn in fourth grade, and on until they graduated. And so now we have one of your famous visuals that we use as a slide that says CPS graduate students without the skills they need. And you show 79% of black students graduate, 11%. It's now higher. It's now 84%. But blacks only read at 11%. 11% of the black kids read at grade level. Some would say read at all. Hispanics, it's 18%. So 90% of the kids, of the black kids, can't read.
Yeah, this is what's
graduating.
This upset a lot of people. And I remember when we put this out, it must have been 2018, Lori Lightfoot was bragging about 84% record graduation rates. She was bragging about it. but she wasn't telling the other part of the truth, right? It's the kids can't read, and you've got it right there. 80% of kids graduating, and only 11% of black kids doing math at reading at grade level. Massive failure. And everybody knows it's just a lie.
But they don't know this.
When you
Most
say
people,
they,
and the parents, the population at large, we have 2.7 million people in Chicago. Ballpark, how many people know the slide that you've just referred to? 11% of blacks reading at grade level, 18% of Hispanics reading at grade level. How many people know that?
Well, let's just look at what happened in the last few days. Pedro Martinez recently bragged about, he came out publicly said our high schools couldn't be doing better. That's what he told the parents. He told them they had record graduation rates. He said the black scores and Hispanic scores had improved. He was saying those kind of things. But that's what he wants parents to hear. Parents see their kids moved along from one grade to the next. They think their kids are doing well. And we have to remember, we're talking about a lot of low income, in some cases, low income families, probably working 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs, sometimes single moms. They may not be able to keep up with exactly what's going on in the school, but they see their kid being moved from one grade to the other year after year. They see their kids graduate. They see Pedro Martinez talking about how well things are. You can maybe excuse some of them for thinking their kids are doing okay. But the reality is that most people don't know this. And as I've gone through this, and I didn't know this a few years ago until I started digging in, how few kids can read at grade level. And even then, many of them are 2, 3, and 4 years behind. They'll never catch up.
But it's not just, as you said, you referred back to 50 years ago, and certainly the last 20, 25 years I've been looking at it, it seems like these numbers fluctuate from maybe 10% to 20%, and that's it. They hardly ever go higher. They might reach a subset of one. There are now 10 districts in Chicago.
Jeff, they keep changing the test all the time, so it's hard to tell what's really going on. I think you can just assume that most of them can't read at grade level all the time.
Do you think Pedro Martinez knows that?
I think he knows it because he's certainly he's heard it from us. He's heard it from, we've been on Univision. We've been on many shows talking about this. What I do find interesting, Jeff, for the first time in years, is I'm starting to see these numbers in many places now. So I think we've been successful in getting even the mainstream media to start talking about these numbers. Doesn't mean parents know it yet, but we're seeing, and even Johnson's being attacked on it. He's being attacked on these empty schools. People don't like what they see at CPS. And everybody's starting to know now, nationally, internationally, people are writing about this. It's a massive failure. They're failing kids, and they're destroying kids' lives, and nothing is being done about it.
The mayor has said, when questioned on this recently, you know this, the mayor has said, when he's asked about underutilization, when he's asked about a high school that has enrollment space for 900 but only 30, and he wants to do tremendous additional money for operating, additional money for repairs for a school that has 3% at capacity. And he says it doesn't matter how many kids are there, we still have to fix these things.
Yeah, he made that comment last week about how it doesn't matter how many kids are in a school for how much we spend in that school, which is a little crazy. I think the big problem is that people are starting to realize that this is a real mess. It's hard to find a fix for CPS. So here, let's bring up one other important point while we're covering the issues. How much money is being spent there? Because many people will say, well, of course kids can't read because CPS doesn't spend enough money. In fact, Mayor Johnson keeps going to Springfield asking for another $1 billion. The reality is that CPS is now spending all in budget $30,000 for every student, $30,000 per student. And it's been a massive increase over the last few years. There's a lot of money there. The question is going to be, do they ever use that money for learning, or is it only used for compensation and pensions, which is what it is.
Right. Your data show last 7 years up 74%. So it had been in 2018 17,000 per kid per year. Now it's 30,000 per kid per year. And yet, remember, people's taxes have gone up to pay for that. Of course. Yeah. Of course. I mean, 2/3 to 3/4 of your property taxes across the state are education spending. And so it's kind of interesting. Well, not kind of. It is. It's very interesting that as we tape this on October 21, as people watch it, most likely the week of October 28, a week before the November 5 elections, a week before the first elections of school board members, perhaps ever, certainly with this kind coming up in 2026, it will be a fully elected 21-person school board. There's really not that much discussion of what we've just been discussing in these school that I hear at forums. I hear it on my show, but I don't hear it much. I don't hear these data being discussed elsewhere. Is there a fix?
I wouldn't count. So one thing I'm totally against is just incremental things. We've been doing incrementalist type reforms for, slightly longer day. You remember Rahm Emanuel was fighting for the longer day and things like that. None of that matters. None of it matters because the system doesn't care for those things. Even if you push up reading from 25% to 26%, it's still failing the majority of the kids. I think what we need to think about strongly is two things. First is school choice. Right now, the unions have all the power. It's a power play between the unions and the administrators. They control a $10 billion budget, $26 billion in pension payouts. That's a lot of money. Nobody wants to mess that up, right? They'll fight, but they don't want to mess up the system. What we need to have is parents saying, we want a new system. We want the power. Give us the power to take the public money, take a voucher, take an education savings account, and go somewhere else. A private school, parochial school, home learning, it doesn't matter. It's something different, but give us the power to walk away from this failure. And maybe only then will CPS then say, hey, if we're not careful, we're going to lose all our students. They'd have to ship up. And that's what we need to see is a massive improvement only because CPS faces the pressure of losing all the kids. And remember, I may sound harsh, but remember 125,000 kids have left in the last 2 decades without school choice. They're just leaving Chicago. They're leaving the system, maybe to go to private school in Chicago, or they're going to the suburbs, or they're leaving Illinois altogether. And so if we're not careful, we're going to lose all of our future kids, the families that go with them, the tax base that goes with them, and we'll watch them move to another city or another state.
So some of the administrators, maybe Pedro, would say, well, Ted, there's choice. If they're at a traditional neighborhood school and they don't like it, they can go to a select enrollment school. If they can test in, they could go to a magnet school.
That's not choice, by the way. That's selective enrollment.
Oh, so it's not choice because you got to test in.
You got to get in, right? Choice would be I can go to another school without having to test in.
Well, you can go to a magnet school without testing in.
Well,
you can go to a charter school without. Is that an answer? Because that's what they would say.
It's not an answer because, first of all, if it's a really good school, it's hard to get into because there's no space, right? So if everybody sees this as a failing school, so we all try to go to that one over here that's better, well, only somebody can get in because there's an enrollment cap, right? There's only so many seats. So the choice thing doesn't work. There might be choice to get away from like a gang-laden school to this one, but we see the results. You've got them all here. In most cases, they're all failing in terms of reading and math.
Right, and writing. We don't see writing, but I'm sure it's pretty similar. It's the old thing, reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's, as they used to call it, right? Yeah. Nothing's changed, although we were doing much better in those days, I think, on reading, writing,
well, yeah,
arithmetic.
It used to be in the old days, you had discipline. I think that's a big part of it. You had a teacher who could probably control the classroom and demand discipline and had a focus. Today, we have a totally different world. We got kids with phones, which is horrible. I think it's probably one of the biggest detriments to kids learning. They have the phones in the classroom. Teachers can't discipline. There's a lot of risk of disciplining. And so we just have a kind of a chaotic system. And I'm speaking in general terms. I know that there's teachers who run good, I'll get pushback. There's teachers who run good classrooms and great principals. But all I care about is I look at the outcomes, Jeff. And the outcomes tell me everything I need to know.
Well, you look at metrics and you would say if we had a different kind of system, if they had competition, if kids could leave and go not just to the public schools, but to the private schools, which many claim are better at discipline, better at these scores in terms of percentage of kids reading at grade level across the board, whether it's blacks, whether it's Hispanics, whether it's whites, at least people could make that choice. And there would be more metrics, presumably, to help them with that choice. And now there's very little metrics. And
you don't hear people talking about reading scores. I don't hear it.
And yet all of your numbers, all of the slides people see, whether they've seen our shows with 4 of the candidates for the school board, Andre Smith, Michelle Pierre, Bruce Leon, and most recently and most recently Miguel Lewis. And all of these shows, we've used all of these slides. They've seen the performance metrics, and they've seen the cost. They've seen the $30,000 figure. They've seen the $10 billion budget. And maybe we're not reaching enough people. So do you envision, if there were really a movement, wouldn't there'd be tremendous advertising, tremendous information, tremendous billboards, et cetera?
Well,
Is that the vision you have?
There needs to be a movement. You're seeing school choice blossom across the country. And let me explain this part. So in Iowa, this year and last year, they passed a law that allows every single kid in the state, doesn't matter race, color, doesn't matter education level, financial level, every single kid can get access to an $8,000 education savings account. So if a kid wants to leave the public school system and go to a different kind of school, they can. Every single one. That's called educational freedom. No kid is trapped in a school that they can't get out of. It's almost the exact same thing in Indiana. It's almost what they call universal school choice. Everybody gets it. Ohio just passed it. Florida has it. Arizona has it. Carolinas have it. It's going everywhere. And that's the real freedom. And think about it, man. Think about the freedom for a low-income single mom who knows her kid is not learning at that school in Illinois, in Chicago, and she has no choice but to send her kid there unless she's willing to like pack up and move to Atlanta or somewhere. Imagine her saying tomorrow, giving her the choice to take that voucher, $8,000, $12,000, whatever amount we want to make it, and go to a private school, somewhere where she now has control to decide the future for her kid. That's the power. And it's amazing that our legislature won't give. They claim they're for equity. They claim they're for supporting the blacks and the Latinos and low income, but they won't empower the parents with that power to have that school choice. You know why? Because the unions, the legislators, and the school administrators have a monopoly over that money and power, and they don't want to give it up because it would be dangerous for them to give it up.
So it appears to be a Chicago problem, but once you get out, you've provided the data around the state, and the data are quite similar, whether it's Quincy, whether it's Decatur, whether it's anywhere, major cities, other less major cities, getting these performance numbers quite similar. So it's an Illinois problem. It could be even worse. It could be an America problem.
Well, no, it's an Illinois problem in particular. This is the state with the strongest public sector union powers in the country. And just last 2 years ago, we passed Amendment 1, which enshrined in the Illinois Constitution the union powers into the Constitution. Our legislators, in a bipartisan push, gave the unions the strongest powers in the country. And that's why they get to do this, and that's why parents and advocates like us have no power vis-a-vis the system. They have all the power because they're protected in the Constitution. Try to unwind anything. Try to close down a school right now. You see what's happening with the fights over empty schools. Take Douglas High School. You mentioned it earlier. Capacity for 900 kids. It has 35 kids in the entire school. Right. 900 capacity, 35 kids. It spends $68,000 a year. And what's fascinating is it has 22 staff. So it's almost a 1-for-1 staff to teacher ratio. And 0 kids there can read. And that's the kind of stuff that stays open. And Brandon Johnson and the CTU will never shut that thing down, even though it would be beneficial to everybody, from taxpayers to kids in better schools.
And yeah, we've used your slide that says 34% of the traditional neighborhood schools are half empty or worse. A third of the traditional neighborhood schools. And remember, Brandon Johnson is pushing to minimize the select enrollment schools, to minimize the magnet schools, to minimize any other choices. They want to bring them back to these schools that right now are half empty, and they're not performing, and it's a higher cost, so it's making matters worse.
Well, he doesn't want to shut those schools. He probably just wants to turn them into traditional schools. He's still got a problem because these schools are empty, and they cost taxpayers money. If you take Douglas, you got 30 kids in a school. Well, they don't have the benefit of all the other resources a bigger school has. And that's why none of them can read. So those are the kind of issues.
So you need an overhaul of the system And it has to start in Springfield because you're saying the Illinois Education Code, the Illinois laws, now the Illinois Constitution are so favorable to public sector union power, to teacher union power, you can't change any of the things you would like because the law is on their side.
And it's not just the law. This is how absurd it has become. It's not just the law, it's the Constitution now.
Right.
Right? So
well, that's
it
part
used to
of the
be
law.
right,
Yes.
well, no, right. I mean, you're right, but think about this. If it was just a law, you could get a 50%.
You could change the
you
statute.
could change the
right,
statute
right.
with a 50% vote, 50% plus one.
Now you have to amend.
Now you got to get an amendment to the Constitution.
Right.
Look at a genius on their part. And this is why I think, not that people do their calculations because they don't sit there and think about the Constitution and amendments. What they do is say, holy cow, I'm trapped in this school. We haven't even talked about the crime nearby, especially if you're in the south or west sides. You're trapped in this school, and what are you supposed to do? So they make a calculation to say, I'm leaving. Now, it's the same calculation one might do if they were methodical about it and looked at the laws and the Constitution, they'd leave. But they're just doing their own gut feel, grassroots, kitchen table decisions. I'm out of here. That's what's hurting Chicago.
So as people watch this show, and they'll see it the week of October 28th, a week later, or actually right now, they're early elections, they are voting on school board candidates in the 10 districts. In 9 of those districts, Juan Ringo and Andrew Boy, Inc.'s Illinois Network of Charter Schools, Urban Center Action, they pushed, I think, the candidates they thought were pro-school choice, anti-CTU, anti those kind of abusive powers. They have 9 candidates. The Chicago Teachers Union, and the Chicago Teachers Union has endorsed in those races 10 candidates. So there's a clash. There's a clash of ideas if these candidates are arguing that for school choice. There's a clash about the abuses by the Chicago Teachers Union. And Mayor Brandon Johnson gets to appoint 11 of the 21. So in best case scenario, even if the pro-school choice forces won, they wouldn't have a majority.
That's okay. Even if they win and they start to make noise and have a position, that's okay. And bless them for bless those candidates who are running and standing up to the CTU. Right? Nobody has stood up to the CTU in a long time. Let's see what they can get done. I don't have a feel for that, but again, bless those candidates for speaking up and saying we don't support. If you look at what the mayor's trying to do, like you said, close selective enrollment schools. Most normal people don't want that. He says he wants to get rid of testing because testing is racist, right? Again, another problem. So if these candidates that are, let's call them reform type, if they're standing up to all that, fantastic. I say all that. Nevertheless, we have to do things at the state level, and so really, what this all comes down to me, Jeff, is how are we going to use this information? How are we going to get this in front of parents, and not in a more marketing centric way? How do we get it so that we bypass the media, the traditional media, so that we bypass the political establishment, the teacher establishment, so that parents understand where things are in their schools and they can demand much more and demand school choice, because that's where we need to get. We need to get to the point where the parents are making all the demands and not the unions.
So maybe they are laying a foundation for 2026 when all 21 school board members will be elected, not appointed, when the president of the school board at CPS will be running citywide and will be elected citywide. So you're really electing 21 people. And if you really had substantial funding, and if you continue to do this work, you continue to generate data, generate metrics, and if there were people who stepped up, who wanted to put up some billboards around the city, the very same slides we're talking about.
Take a huge marketing effort, yes.
It would take a huge marketing effort, and there are the people who tend to support school choice often financially tend to be knowledgeable in the financial sector because they're used to dealing with metrics, right?
It's numbers, right?
That's right.
I mean,
you were a part of that field.
But you don't even have to. Finance guy. But you don't even have to be a finance guy.
Yeah.
The question is going to be, right? You look and say, can the children read? Show me the results. If these are the tests that the state has decided to take for reading, then show me that they can read. And if they can't, who's accountable? But we don't do that. Now, I'll tell you another interesting point, Jeff, to your point, was that, this is not only a Chicago problem. Believe it or not, the reading results indicator are far worse there than here. At least here you have some good schools. Indicator, almost all of them have very dismal results. Same thing in Peoria, same thing in Rockford. So for me, this thing is not a Chicago thing. It's very much an Illinois thing. What we need is the alliance of all parents and all businesses, right? Because this is the future workforce. Every single business should care about this, and so should religious groups, because we're talking about crime and family development, all these things. Everybody should be in sync on this. And it's fascinating that you don't hear a massive battle about this in Illinois.
And we're going to get out, but one really crucial point, which I know you know, because you've written about it, and that's how I know about it, is the state of Illinois has politicians who have a vested interest in getting contributions from the people who are behind this system in the public schools, not just CPS, but behind it across the state of Illinois. And there are teachers' unions other than CTU and the suburbs and so forth. So in a sense, there's a collusion going on here.
Oh, absolutely.
Where the contributions are being made to the politicians,
right. Mm-hmm.
and the politicians are reciprocating and giving them tremendous union power in the statutes, in the Constitution.
Yeah. We've talked about this 50 years of problem. It's the same thing that's happened with the laws. Over time, the unions have increasingly, public sector unions, I'm not talking about the private unions, the public sector unions have increasingly supported the legislators, and the legislators pay back the unions with powers, collective bargaining powers, strike powers, Amendment 1. And so this is how it works. And it will only change when the parents either all leave, right? And we're seeing a lot about migration of Illinois, or when the parents finally stand up and they become a force that the legislators have to decide. Do they listen to the people, or do they listen to the unions? And today they're only listening to the unions because the unions are organized, amassed, big money, and they exert their influence. Parents don't exert their influence.
So two things. People have to organize. They have to go over the heads of the politicians. Politicians can count noses when they see large numbers of people want to be empowered, want school vouchers. We can quibble about whether if we're spending $30,000 state, federal, local money, can we take the $30,000 and give it to them? Can we take $15,000? It has to be.
You can take 12, you can take 15.
If it has to be large enough so that people have purchasing power, so they can exit the system and improve the plight of their kids.
You can get into private schools for $12,000. Mm-hmm. You can get even less for elementary.
We know the problem. We've covered it. You've got a solution.
Well,
you've got a solution. It's difficult. It's political. It involves changing, ultimately, laws and the Constitution. But most of all, it involves galvanizing or mobilizing the citizens of the city, the state, to see the problems they have and work together.
And to care about them, right?
To care about them.
Yeah,
right.
There's a lot of people who say, hey, Ted, Jeff, you guys forgot to talk about parents and their obligation here.
Right.
And it's true. Too many parents aren't engaged enough. More parents need to be more engaged. And there can't be denying that. There's a lot of that has to do with the family structure, incomes. No doubt. I don't want to even minimize those things. But that said, I know that a poor mother who could be close to poverty still wants the best for his or for her child. And to give them that power is so empowering, to use the same word. It's so empowering to give that parent the choice. Because today, all they can do is go like that. What do I do? I think it's just telling the truth. I see it more like I see what's happening and they say kids are doing well. The only way I can come back is to say, here's your own. By the way, this is all their own data, right? It's not, I don't do this. This is their own data. So I'm not even a data guy. I'm just taking their data and giving it back to them and saying, no, kids can't read.
Next week, we have here on Public Affairs, Juan Ringel from Urban Center Action. He'll go on and talk more, I think, about the elections. You'll see that before the election. Come back next week and every week to Public Affairs.